So last week, we did a quick review of all of the shlokas that we have covered so far. And then we picked up shloka 21 for discussion. This particular chapter is titled Transcendental Knowledge. So transcendental knowledge means knowledge about the Supreme Lord, knowledge about the fact that we are eternally the servants of the Supreme Lord, and the relationship between the Lord and his devotee. That is essentially the meaning of transcendental knowledge. In the last week's shloka, we read shloka 21, where Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. So we discussed that the Lord is stating here in the shloka, when he says gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possession, it simply indicates that we understand that everything was created by the Supreme Lord, and therefore everything belongs to the Supreme Lord first. So in that sense, the Lord is the owner, the proprietor, the controller of everything. So none of us can really claim anything to belong to ourselves because we had no effort in creating that particular thing or that particular person. The Lord also says such a person acts only for the bare necessities of life. And in that context, we also discussed when the Lord is saying such people only work for the bare necessities of life, he is really referencing to the pure devotees who are indifferent to anything that is material. However, what about for those who are grahasthas or those who are not in the sannyasi ashram or the brahmachari ashram? How should they read this instruction that we should act only for the bare necessities of life? In an ideal scenario, we should all lead a simple life. We should not entangle ourselves too much into chasing things, because the more we chase things, the further away we are from Krishna. However, if you are a Kshatriya and you are a ruler, here Krishna is not telling Arjuna, give up your kingdom, give up everything else and work for me. Quite the contrary. Krishna is saying, work to fight on my behalf, and you can certainly enjoy the kingdom. There's nothing wrong with you enjoying the kingdom, as long as you are always keeping this in mind, that I am the proprietor of everything. So if one works in this mood, that nothing belongs to me, everything belongs to Krishna, and therefore everything that I have, both material and in terms of relationships, I will endeavor to use them in the service of Krishna. So here the Lord is saying, thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. So the Lord is indicating that such a person, even if he is not a pure devotee, but is a sadhaka, trying to practice Krishna consciousness, even such a person does not accumulate sins. So sometimes in life, accidents happen. So say, for example, you are a good driver, you are driving carefully, you're paying attention to the road, you're paying attention to the signs, you are adhering to the speed limit. But suddenly out of the blue, someone comes or someone just falls in front of you, then that person is likely to get injured. But even in the court of law, if there was no intent on your part to harm that person, it just happened accidentally, then you are not necessarily held culpable or responsible for that offense. So even in spiritual matters, the Lord is actually judging you on your intent. If your intent is to serve the Lord, He overlooks your anarthas. That doesn't mean we as bhaktas do not try our best to get rid of our anarthas. But the Lord is looking for the sincerity, your motivation behind why you are practicing bhakti. Are you practicing bhakti because you want something from Krishna, or are you practicing bhakti simply because you want to please Krishna? So the Lord is always looking at the intent, and intent resides in our mind, in our intellect. So similarly, as the Lord explains in several shlokas in the Bhagavad Gita, where He says that one should not look upon a devotee of the Lord as someone who is imperfect. Externally to the rest of the world, he may be committing certain acts that are not in congruence with the scriptures. But at the same time, in the Lord's eyes, you are His devotee, and therefore you are under His protection. Because sometimes, even if we have understood that the Lord is the supreme controller and proprietor, occasionally we may make mistakes. And the Lord will excuse you for such mistakes as long as it is not a repeat offense. So we cannot afford to be repeat offenders. We need to recognize our mistakes and try to do our best to actually correct those mistakes. So today, we are going to try and do the next 3 shlokas. Because from shlokas 16 to 24, the Lord is talking about the different types of work. He's essentially talking about karma yoga, but in the context of having knowledge as to who you are actually serving. So let's get into shloka 22. So please recite after me. Yadrichalabha santushto Dvandvatito vimatsarah
Dvandvatito vimatsarah
Samasiddhava siddhau cha Kritva pinani badhyate Yadrichalabha santushto Dvandvatito vimatsarah Samasiddhava siddhau cha Kritva pinani badhyate. Once more. Yadrichalabha santushto Dvandvatito vimatsarah Samasiddhava siddhau cha Kritva pinani badhyate. Word for word meaning and translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yadricha, out of its own accord.
Out of its own accord.
Labha, with gain. Santushtaha, satisfied. Dvandva, duality.
Duality.
Atitaha,
Atita.
surpassed.
Surpassed.
Vimatsaraha,
Vimata.
free from envy.
Free from envy.
Samaha,
Shama.
steady.
Steady.
Siddhau,
Thou.
in success.
In success.
Asiddhau,
Failure.
failure. Cha,
Cha.
also.
Also.
Kritva,
Twa.
doing.
Doing.
Api,
Happy.
although.
No.
Na,
No.
never.
Never.
Nibadhyate,
Nibadhyate.
becomes affected.
Becomes affected.
Translation: he who is satisfied
Who is satisfied
with gain,
with gain,
which comes of its own accord,
which comes of its own accord,
who is free from duality
is free from duality,
and does not envy,
does not envy,
who is steady
who is steady
in both success and failure,
both success and failure,
is never entangled,
entangled,
although performing actions. Purport: a Krishna conscious person does not make much endeavor even to maintain his body. He is satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accord. So here Srila Prabhupada is saying, someone who is a serious practitioner of Bhakti Yoga will not struggle too hard to try to maintain their body. Why? Because struggling or endeavoring too hard to maintain your body means that many minutes and hours you are spending away from Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada is saying he is satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accord. He neither begs nor borrows, but he labors honestly as far as in his power and is satisfied with whatever is obtained by his own honest labor. So Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing when we work, we should put in honest effort. We should do our best. We should have determination. We should have enthusiasm when we're doing anything. But after doing those activities, we should be satisfied with what we get in return. Because here your intent is honestly doing your duties and responsibilities. Then Srila Prabhupada is saying he is therefore independent in his livelihood, in the sense that he knows in the context of his relationship with the Supreme Lord, how much he should spend time in taking care of his bodily requirements. He does not allow anyone's service to hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. One of the things that a devotee does is we try our best to protect our bhakti creeper. This little seed that has been planted in you through contact with other devotees or through contact with pure devotees, that seed has to be protected, it has to be nurtured. There is a beautiful explanation of this in the scriptures. Both in the Ishopanishad as well as in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is a wonderful analogy used to explain how this creeper actually grows. So let us say I have a plant at home. In order for that plant to grow, or let us say, first of all, the seed, let's start with the seed. If I place a seed in the soil that has already been roasted, and I pour water and give it as much nutrition as I want, it is still not going to grow because that seed has lost its potency through the process of frying it. So the potent seed of bhakti is actually planted in you by Guru. But then we have a responsibility of making sure that that particular seed, that gift that has been given to you by your Guru, is well taken care of. So our Shastras say, if the bhakti creeper has to grow, first of all, it needs nutrients, a nutrient-rich soil. This nutrient-rich soil is all of your good habits in the form of sadhana. And what about water that nourishes that particular seed? Our Shastras describe that the water that is going to nourish your bhakti creeper is hearing and chanting. So if you don't do these two things of hearing and chanting every day, that bhakti creeper is not going to flourish. Last week, a couple of weeks ago, I went out of town and I forgot to tell my husband that he should water the plants in my absence. Sure enough, when I came back, they were practically dead. So imagine, in order to maintain a garden, a gardener will always nourish those set of plants with adequate sunlight, water, nutrition, etc. Similarly, our process of practicing bhakti should be so important to us that we will never give up the process of hearing and chanting the names of the Supreme Lord. Hence, Prabhupada is saying, once you become a serious sadhaka, he does not allow anyone's service to hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness, which means you will not allow others to disturb your practice of bhakti. You will not allow others to disturb your sadhana. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action without being disturbed by the duality of the material world. You know, a coin has two sides. One side is heads, the other side is tails. So the Lord has created this material universe with duality. So if there is heat, there is cold. If there is something sweet, there is something sour. If there is day, there is night. If there is rains, there is drought. If there is a rose, you have to deal with the thorn. To enjoy the rose, you have to learn how to deal with the thorn. That's just how life is. So life is full of dualities. So you will have periods and bouts of happiness. Along with it will come some distress. So you have to learn to appreciate life in spite of its distresses. So there will be victory, there will be defeat, there will be fame, there will be notoriety. Lord Ram, one day before he was supposed to be coronated as the king, just one day before, all the preparations are done, everybody is joyous, everybody is happy, because everybody loves Lord Ram. But how did he deal with his banishment to the forests? He took it in stride and he rose above the situation. He accepted the words of his mother. Because Lord Rama's point was that because his father had promised Kaikeyi those two boons, if he rejects, or rather, if he accepts Dashrath Maharaj's entreaties for him to stay and not leave, he would in effect invalidate his father's promise to Kaikeyi. And he did not want to do that, because a son's duty is to make sure that his father's words to others are honored. So even as devotees, we will experience ups and downs in our spiritual life, in our material life also. But we simply accept it as the will of the Lord and continue to practice bhakti. The duality of the material world is felt in terms of heat and cold, or misery and happiness. A Krishna conscious person is above duality because he does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, he is steady both in success and in failure. These signs are visible when one is fully in transcendental knowledge. So for us in the material world, there will always be someone who has more than us. And similarly, there will always be someone who has less than us. Envy is one thing that will prohibit you from practicing Krishna consciousness. Why? Because the acharyas say, let us say somebody is far more successful than me. Let's just say I've taken an exam. I know somebody else has scored 98. Now I scored only 88. Immediately I'm thinking, oh, how did that other person score so high? This is the beginning of envy. Envy that somebody else is better than you or more successful than you, or whatever it is. The acharyas warn us, envying others of their success or whatever it is that they have is in reality envy of this Lord. So when we envy someone, we're actually envying Krishna. So Krishna doesn't see any distinction between envying others for what they have and envying him. Now you may say, how is that possible? So I know Krishna is the Supreme Lord. I don't envy him because he's the most powerful. But the fact is, somebody who has a little bit more than you, you have already started down the path of envy. So pretty soon, if you don't watch it, our acharyas say you will end up envying Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada says that the final trap of Maya is to convince you that you are God. That's the final trap of Maya Devi. To convince you, you are the greatest. There's nobody like you. So if we envy others for whatever they have, it will ultimately lead you to envy Krishna. And therefore, envying others is as good as envying Krishna, because Krishna is the most powerful, most successful, most beautiful, whatever you want to call it. Because if a thought creeps into your mind, why is that person so rich? Next thing is, why is Krishna so powerful? Why is Krishna so rich? So this is the final trap of Maya. So envy is something that devotees are extremely cautious about. So Srila Prabhupada says in one of his lectures that we should not be greedy for things. Don't compete thinking even I want to be a millionaire. The reality is, let us say somebody gives two different people 1 crore each and tells them, do what you want with it. One person may choose to use it in one way, another person may choose to use that 1 crore another way. Same thing, if you give 1 crore to two business people and tell them, here's seed money for you to develop your business, there's no guarantee that both of them or even one of them may succeed. So this envy, our acharyas say, is actually a disease. It's a material disease that impacts your spirituality. So Krishna says here, yadrichalabha, whatever you get, be satisfied with that. So whatever you get, that is what you are rewarded by Krishna and therefore accept it. Now, this can be a little conflicting instruction because you may say, does that mean I shouldn't work hard? No, that's not what it means at all. Honest effort has to go in because nobody can accomplish anything or achieve anything without endeavor. So one should try one's best and be satisfied with the results that come out of it without too much stress and strain and anxiety being created, such that it puts pressure on your spiritual life. Does that make sense? So all the acharyas are saying is balance the two. There's nothing wrong even if you have material desires, but in the pursuit of material desires, please do not give up spirituality. If in pursuit of material desires, you are forced to give up spirituality, then rethink whether that desire is actually desirable for you. Because there's nothing more precious than spirituality, than that seed of bhakti that has been planted in you. Because Krishna says not everybody gets it. It is very rare. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that his devotees are very rare. 1 in a million become his devotees. So if we accept that we have received something very precious from our acharyas in the form of practicing this Krishna consciousness, then we will know that that is something that we have. Prabhupada used to use this beautiful analogy, Sometimes little children, when they are playing around, if they find the father's wallet, they will grab hundreds of rupees from the wallet. And what will the father do? In order to get those 100 rupees back from the child, the father will tempt the child with a 10 paisa chocolate or whatever, candy or whatever, 10 rupees candy, in order to swap. So the father will give a 10 rupee candy. In return, the child will give up very easily the 500 rupee note or a 1,000 rupee note or a 2,000 rupee note. Krishna is doing the opposite with you. Through the acharyas, Krishna is saying, I am giving you crores. And you are holding on to this little broken piece of glass saying, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. Krishna is giving us immense amount of wealth through that seed that has been planted in you by an acharya. But we reject it. We're saying, no, Krishna, I don't want that. I'm happy with this broken piece of glass in my hand. Because we don't have the knowledge that helps us discriminate between material success and spiritual success. But ultimately, competition begins with jealousy of Krishna. Because we know that Krishna is a supreme enjoyer. So if you see somebody else enjoying a little bit better than you, and you become jealous of them, then in reality, you are jealous of Krishna. So Krishna wants you to get out of this prison house, and he's planted the seed of bhakti in you, and you're saying, no, Krishna, not now, I'm too busy. I've got to do this, I've got to do that. So all our acharyas and are begging and pleading with us is, let's get our priorities straight. Just spending 10 minutes a day chanting one round of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is far more valuable for you than spending 10 hours chasing some, as Prabhupada likes to call it, phantasmagoria, something that you've built as a dream in your mind. It doesn't mean you should not take care of yourself. You should take care of yourself and your family, no doubt about it. So let's go to the next shloka. Gata sangasya muktasya
Gada sangasya muktasya
jnanavasthita chetasaha
jnanavasthita
yajñāyācharatah karma samagram praviliyate.
samagram
Gata sangasya muktasya
Gada sangasya
jnanavasthita chetasaha yajñāyācharatah karma samagram praviliyate. Once more. Gata sangasya muktasya jnanavasthita chetasaha yajñāyācharatah karma samagram praviliyate. Word for word meaning, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gata sangasya, of one unattached to the modes of material nature. Muktasya, of the liberated. Jnana avasthita, situated in transcendence. Chetasaha, whose wisdom. Yajñāya, for the sake of yajna. Krishna. Acharataha, acting. Karma, work. Samagram, in total. Praviliyate, merges entirely. Translation. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. So we'll read the purport and then we will discuss the importance and relevance of the shloka. Becoming fully Krishna conscious, one is freed from all dualities and thus is free from the contaminations of the material modes. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional position in relationship with Krishna. And thus, his mind cannot be drawn from Krishna consciousness. Consequently, whatever he does for Krishna, who is the primeval Vishnu. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifices because sacrifice aims at satisfying the Supreme Person, Vishnu, Krishna. The resultant reactions to all such work certainly merge into transcendence, and one does not suffer material effects. So here the Lord is saying, this particular verse is a conclusion of Karma Yoga. So the first time the Lord uses the term yajna is in the 9th shloka of the 3rd chapter. So let's just have a quick look at the 9th shloka. Where essentially the Lord has said that work must be performed as a sacrifice to Vishnu. If we don't perform work as a sacrifice to Vishnu, the Lord says we have to suffer the consequences of it. So in this particular shloka, in the 3rd chapter, Yajñārthat karma nonyatra loko yam karma bandhanah tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangas samachara. In this particular shloka, the Lord talks about how all of us have to work. We are forced to work. We don't have a choice. So Krishna is saying work has to be done as a sacrifice for Vishnu. Another name of Lord Vishnu is Yajna. So Vishnu is also known as Yajna Purusha. So whatever sacrifices we undertake, who is accepting that sacrifice? That sacrifice is being accepted by Vishnu. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction. For whose satisfaction? For Lord Vishnu's satisfaction. And in that way, you will always remain free from bondage. So Krishna is saying, if we make up our minds that we only want to work for Krishna, or whatever work that we undertake, we're actually doing it to please the Supreme Lord. Then if you do this, if you work for Vishnu, then you don't have to suffer the karmic reactions of this. Now, traditionally, the word yajna means fire sacrifice. That's how we've understood it. But in this particular shloka here, in shloka 23, the Lord is expanding the meaning of yajna to include everything, including sacrificing oneself for the service of Krishna. So here, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes in his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, he is using a metaphorical analogy, and we'll understand what is Krishna actually telling Arjuna here. Krishna is not telling Arjuna walk away from the battlefield, quite the opposite. So what is Krishna telling here? This entire war is actually the yajna, the sacrifice. The Gandiva bow of Arjuna is like that ladle that you use to pick up the ghee and pour it in the fire. So the bow of Arjuna is like that ladle offering the ghee into the fire. So what is this ghee that is being offered by Arjuna in this fire? It is those who are not adhering to dharma. Who are they? Kauravas. So Arjuna is using his Gandiva bow as a ladle to offer the Kauravas into the fire of sacrifice. in this battlefield. So the Ahuti here is the Kauravas. So Krishna is not telling Arjuna, when he is using the word sacrifice here, he's not telling Arjuna, run away into the forest and perform your sacrifice very nicely. He's saying right here on the battlefield, I am telling you how to perform sacrifice. So we know that in a traditional fire sacrifice, the Yajna Kunda is considered to be the mouth of Krishna or Vishnu. And what you're offering into the fire of that Yajna Kunda, the fire is the tongue of Lord Krishna accepting what you're offering. So the medium of sacrifice is what you're offering into the fire. So the medium of sacrifice for Arjuna is to use his Gandiva bow to put an end to adharma on this battlefield. This battlefield is the Yajna Kunda. And Arjuna has to perform the sacrifice of killing those who are violating dharmic principles. So the battlefield is the place of sacrifice. The war itself is considered the yajna. And the Kauravas are considered the ahuti. And Arjuna's bow, the Gandiva, is considered the ladle that is used to offer the ahuti into the fire of sacrifice. So what is interesting also in this particular shloka is it is a combination of action and knowledge. So Krishna is saying the work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. So Krishna is saying, if you add karma yoga plus jnana yoga together, you are situated in the spiritual platform. So karma means action, jnana means knowledge, and bhakti is actually action and knowledge. So when Krishna is combining karma yoga plus jnana yoga in this one sentence, he actually means bhakti yoga. Because bhakti yoga is acting in knowledge. So devotion actually converts your knowledge into action and your actions also into knowledge. That's the beauty of practicing bhakti. So there is another analogy that Chaitanya Charan Prabhu uses in one of his lectures on this particular shloka, where he talks about two different words that we use in English. One is called motion, the other one is action. Inert things, we use words to indicate motion. For example, the boat is floating on the water. But when we talk about living beings, we use words that are oriented towards action. For example, the boatman is rowing the boat. So essentially here, Krishna is saying, raise yourself from the platform of just performing motions to actually performing action through motivation to work for Krishna. So if you just look at motivation alone on the material platform, it's about eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Those are your material desires. A higher level of motivation for a human being is to actually seek eternity and eternal bliss. We are searching for a place in life where we will live forever and we will live happily forever. That can only happen on the spiritual plane. It cannot happen on the material plane. But what is most important in this particular shloka for you and me to take away is that material laws do not work on you when you are working for Krishna. You are protected by Krishna when you work for him. So Maya Devi cannot touch you when you are working for Krishna. So what does working for Krishna mean? Hearing every day Harikatha, that is working for Krishna. Chanting every day is a sacrifice. So the word sacrifice, Krishna has explained to Arjuna here, is that he has to do his dharma. He's not talking about a fire sacrifice here. But if you expand this further into what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and distributed in Kali Yuga, this sacrifice includes the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That is the topmost sacrifice that can be offered to Krishna in the Kali Yuga. So Shravanam, Kirtanam, both of these are also considered sacrifice. Having only prasadam is also considered a sacrifice or an austerity. So anything material can be converted into spiritual. So let's take a simple example of prasadam. The bhoga is actually cooked with material things that exist on the material realm. But the minute that bhoga is offered to the Lord with love, that bhoga is no longer material. It becomes spiritual, and that is why we call it prasadam. So anything that is offered to Krishna becomes prasadam. It's not just food. Anything that you use in your life, if you offer it to Krishna first before you utilize it for yourself, that becomes prasadam. It is something that the Lord has accepted because you have given it to him out of love. And then you begin to use it in his service. So what is Krishna ultimately saying here? Karma along with knowledge put together, you are always situated on the spiritual platform. So karma plus jnana is actually bhakti yoga, because bhakti yoga is all inclusive. So with that, we will go to the last shloka for today, because it will end a particular section within this chapter. So here in shloka 24, it's very interesting because Krishna uses the word Brahma 6 times, repeatedly. So please repeat after me. Brahmarpanam Brahma Havihi.
Brahmanam Brahmavi.
Brahmagnau Brahmanahutam.
Brahmanagno Brahmanahutam.
Brahmaiva tena gantavyam.
Brahmaiva tena gantavyam.
Brahma karma samadhina.
Brahma karma samadhina.
Brahmarpanam Brahma Havihi.
Brahmanam Brahmavi.
Brahmagnau Brahmanahutam.
Brahmagno Brahmanahutam.
Brahmaiva tena gantavyam.
Brahmaiva tena gantavyam.
Brahma karma samadhina.
Brahma karma samadhina.
Brahmarpanam Brahma Havihi.
Brahma arpanam Brahmavi.
Brahmagnau Brahmanahutam.
Brahmagno Brahmanahutam.
Brahmaiva tena gantavyam.
Brahmaiva tena gantavyam.
Brahma karma samadhina.
Brahma karma samadhina.
So it's a very special shloka because the Lord is using the word Brahma repeatedly. So word for word meaning, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Brahma
Brahma.
spiritual in nature,
spiritual in nature,
arpanam,
Arpanam. Contribution.
contribution,
Brahma,
Brahma.
the supreme,
The Supreme.
Habihi,
He.
butter,
Butter.
Brahma,
Brahman,
spiritual,
Spiritual.
Agnau,
Now.
the fire of consummation,
In the fire of
fire of
consummation.
consummation,
Brahmana,
Brahmana.
by the spirit soul,
By the
spirit
soul.
Hutam,
Uttam,
offered,
offer,
Brahma,
Brahma.
spiritual kingdom,
spiritual
Kingdom.
Eva,
Eva.
certainly,
certainly,
Certainly.
Tena,
Tena.
by him,
By
Gantavyam,
Gantavyam,
to be reached,
to
be
be reached,
Brahma,
Brahma.
spiritual,
spiritual,
karma,
Karma.
in activities,
In activities.
activities,
samadhina,
Samadhi.
by complete absorption.
By complete absorption.
absorption,
Translation: a person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness
a person
Who is
fully
fully
absorbed
absorbed in Krishna consciousness
is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom
is
sure
sure
to attain the
spiritual
kingdom
kingdom
because of his full contribution
because of his full contribution
to spiritual activities,
to spiritual activities,
in which the consummation is absolute.
in which
this
the consummation
consummation is absolute,
And that which is offered
and that which is offered
is of the same spiritual nature.
of the same
spiritual nature.
Purport. How activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses. So in the next set of verses that we will read next week, which is from Sloka 25 onwards, Krishna is going to talk about the different kind of sacrifices, the different kind of yajnas that different types of people do. But ultimately, all these sacrifices, who is yajna and who is yajna purusha? It is Krishna, it's Lord Vishnu. So it doesn't matter who you are and what sacrifices you keep. The person accepting it is Krishna. But for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. A conditioned soul entangled in material contamination is sure to act in the material atmosphere. And yet he has to get out of such an environment. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness, which means if you are in touch with Krishna on a daily basis, then you are already on the spiritual platform. You are not, you may think you're living in the material world, you have all of these material responsibilities, duties, etc. But if you're in touch with Krishna every day, then you're actually in the spiritual world. Although physically your body may be in the material world. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds. The materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna, or activities, sacrifices, simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. This is the shloka that we read in 3.9, where the Lord himself says, work has to be performed as a sacrifice to Vishnu. the more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. So all of Krishna's energies can be used in his service. A glass of water is Krishna's energy. The mobile phone is made of Krishna's energy. The laptop is made of Krishna's energy. So everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. Therefore, if anything and everything is somehow or the other used in the service of Lord Krishna, then you're already completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada is saying the word Brahma, Brahman means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahma Jyotir, his spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahma Jyotir. But when the Jyotir is covered by illusion, Maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the result are all combined together, Brahman, or the absolute truth. So what does this mean? The contribution, which is whatever is offered into that fire of sacrifice. Fire, understand it metaphorically, not necessarily a physical fire. The contributor offering that contribution is also connected to that fire. Whatever offering is consumed in that fire is also pure. And the result that the contributor gets is also pure. In net, the contribution, the contributor, the consumption, and the result, all of this are necessary for sacrifice, the sum total of which is Brahman. But when that Brahman is covered by Maya, when you think you're offering sacrifice because you want to get something out of it, then that is illusion. So matter dovetailed for the cause of the absolute truth regains its spiritual quality. So that means anything material can be used in Krishna's service. And it immediately becomes spiritual. So Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi or trance. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or sacrifice for the absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performance, and the result or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the absolute, the Supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness. So this explains why the Lord is saying, ultimately sacrifice everything to me. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavihi, Brahmagnau Brahmanahutam, Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. So if you do this, Krishna is saying you're already in samadhi. Even though you're here in this material planet, because you are absorbed in utilizing everything in Krishna's service, you are already in samadhi. You're absorbed in practicing Krishna consciousness. So this is the essence of these three shlokas that we've covered today. In the next shloka, which we will pick up next week, Krishna is going to begin to describe different types of yajnas, some performed by brahmacharis, some performed by Vedantas, some performed by sannyasis. So this Brahma that the Lord is using 6 times is setting the stage for him to talk about the various types of sacrifices. So with that, we'll come to conclusion of our class. Vancha kalpadarupyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta koti vaishnava vrinda ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Gurudev ki jai. Shri Shri Gaura Nitai ki jai. Hare Krishna devotee.